Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene in court today as a judge heard arguments whether she should be able to run for re-election over allegedly helping incite the Capitol riots of January 6, 2021. Joining me now is NBC's Kristen Welker, who will be moderating Meet the Press on Sunday morning. And Kristen, Congresswoman Greene has been, to put it mildly, a polarizing legislator ever since her election here in Georgia. What is the feeling in Washington as this unfolds in a courtroom here? National Republicans, are they essentially turning their head and trying not to look at this?
I think that's actually a very smart way to frame it, Jeff. I think you have moderate Republicans really trying to stay focused on the issues, on the fact that we are in a midterm election year, on the fact that inflation is at a 40-year high. But it really highlights the fact that there is this divide within the Republican Party, and you do have people who are serving in Washington like Marjorie Taylor Greene who would be considered much farther to the right than some of those moderate Republicans. And so I think that's the tension. And it has created challenges not only legislatively, but in these moments, these cultural flashpoints, particularly when not only legally, but we are dealing with the fallout from January 6th, which continues to be a big issue. And obviously you have the January 6th committee, which is still doing its work. And so I think that a moment like this, the court case that you all are watching there in Atlanta really underscores that candidate or lawmakers, I should say, like Marjorie Taylor Greene continue to be a real flashpoint for the Republican Party.
There's a new book coming out by two New York Times reporters about the 2020 election, and the authors released audio revealing that House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said that he was planning to push for then President Trump to resign shortly after January 6th of 2021. Kevin McCarthy would likely be Speaker of the House if the Republicans win the House back in November. Does this change any of that in your estimation? And how will this impact his relationship with former President Trump, if he has one at all now?
This could change his path to the speakership if Republicans do win back the House. And here's why. Because we heard Leader McCarthy come out and firmly deny the contents of that book, which reported, as you just said, on the fact that he talked about calling former President Trump and calling on him to resign. He said that never happened through a spokesperson. That's not the case. It's not true. And yet this audio refutes that, and the world can hear it, that in fact that's exactly what he said verbatim. And so I think it's a political problem for Kevin McCarthy. Will he still have the support of his fellow Republicans to be the leader when he is saying something in private and saying something very different publicly? But I think that it does create potentially a broader problem for Republicans writ large for that very reason, because you do have a number of Republicans who try to walk a fine line when it comes to former President Trump, either not directly denouncing his claims that the election was rigged, which of course are false, or trying to walk a fine line and dance around it, saying one thing in private and a different thing publicly. And I think that this could shine a light on one of those big problems for the Republican Party more broadly. But the question really is going to be focused on Kevin McCarthy. Can he be the Speaker of the House with this explosive audio? We are getting the sense that, and undoubtedly he's reaching out to former President Trump to try to repair that. It'll be interesting to see how Mr. Trump responds. He, of course, will be out at a rally over the weekend, and so I would be surprised if we didn't hear some type of response from him on the trail. But look, this shines a light on how complicated former President Trump is for Republicans and the fine line that so many Republican candidates have to walk as they try to either hold on to their seats or win election.
There's a new Gallup poll showing President Biden now has the second lowest job rating of any elected commander-in-chief in more than 6 decades. Only Donald Trump's was lower. If inflation continues or does not go down, can these numbers go even lower? I mean, if you're a Democrat and you are a Biden loyalist, you have to look at that and sort of go, oh, those numbers need to be better.
It is the biggest issue inside the White House. I can tell you that based on my conversations with administration officials. This is what keeps them up at night. The inflationary figures, and also gas prices. The fact that Americans are paying record high prices all across the country in some states. And so they are laser focused on trying to bring those prices down. That is why you are seeing actions like the president come out and announcing that he's tapping the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. But look, the reality is it may be hard to bring those numbers down by the time voters go to the polls. Now, administration officials are optimistic. They say, look, ultimately, yes, those numbers are going to start to come down in a fall. But there's a big question mark around that, and it makes it that much more difficult for the president and for Democrats to get any type of action on the Biden agenda. Of course, his big climate and spending plan, which has been stalled in Congress. Senator Elizabeth Warren, who we'll be talking to on Meet the Press, has had a pretty stern warning for Democrats that if they don't get some action, some progress on the president's agenda, they will be set up for big losses in the fall. So they are looking at those numbers, those Gallup poll numbers and every other poll very closely, as they know that the biggest thing that's driving them down is inflation, Jeff.
Kristen, we know you grew up in Philadelphia, but come visit us in Atlanta anytime you like, okay?
I sure will. One of my favorite places.
We like hearing that. All right, Meet the Press airs right here at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning on 11 Alive. Kristen Welker, thanks so much.
Great to talk to you.